A Treatise on Post-Digital Governance by J. E. Van Clief. Forward. Predicting and modeling the future economic and political environment is inherently uncertain. However, by examining current trends and giving a thorough reading of academic research, a speculative outlook on the potential developments over the next decade is possible. Part of my motivation for writing this is both to lay out the trends myself and others are seeing, as well as invite criticisms from those who read this. Now, before you ask, what makes you credible? And I give some form of justification through my collegiate studies and world travels, I'd rather direct you to the fact that I have been writing this article in collaboration with various artificial intelligence AI platforms in an attempt to sift through the massive amount of data and writings out there nowadays. I feel I must defend the use of AI as a tool and collaborator, and most likely will have to defend it for the next decade. By using AI platforms like LLMs to not only explore research for me, but also interpret that data in its own words, I believe it is more than possible for the everyday college student or professor to produce writings and studies that can compete with the best of the best in academics, not only from the idea of accuracy but also in critical and predictive thought. Granted, I'm still spending hours upon hours reading and studying on my own in order to collaborate and verify the outputs given to me by any large language model, but still, I think it important to place great weight on the time cut down by using and working with AI on projects like this. To me, the way in which I use AI for writing in economics and politics is the same way mathematicians use calculators to create and solve intense problems. The invention of advanced calculators saved massive amounts of time and allowed even the everyday mathematician to work on more advanced theories and proofs and increase the level of accuracy at the same time. If you are not using some sort of deep learning software or technology to help your studies, work, writing or anything else, it's the same as using only the library to answer your usual Google searches. Let me be clear, it's important to read books and know the fundamentals of any field of research, but once you have the groundwork, it makes sense to use the faster and better resource so your time can be spent on advanced topics or critical thinking. Consulting artificial intelligence, particularly large language models, LLMs, for refinement and augmentation of one's writing, bears striking resemblance to seeking insights from peers or editors. After conducting rigorous research and formulating initial drafts, I utilize AI models trained on my own writings. This allows for meticulous editing, enrichment, and diversification of content. Detractors of such methodologies might consider this approach no different than seeking the expertise of a seasoned editor. Utilizing technology in this manner is simply a contemporary embodiment of age-old collaborative efforts, modernizing and streamlining the editorial process for the current age. Also, in a paper speaking on the post-digital world, it is only fitting AI plays even a small part in its creation. Now that I've given my simple justification on why what you are about to read is accurate, and at the very least allows for a greater discourse on the topic, let us move into the predictions that myself, academics around the world, and even artificial intelligence models have about our future. Abstract. In the context of the inexorable march of technology and its pervasive influence on all facets of human life, post-digital refers to a paradigm wherein digital technologies have become so deeply embedded and normalized within society that their presence is taken as a given, much like electricity or print media. The post-digital era doesn't indicate a move beyond digital, but rather a transition into a phase where digital technology is no longer seen as new or disruptive, but as a fundamental part of the societal fabric. This paper explores how these fundamental changes affect our views of our economics and politics, as well as the resulting governance models that may form in future decades. Post-digital governance. Post-digital governance is the evolution of administrative and organizational structures, policies and strategies in an age where digital technology is omnipresent, integrated, and foundational. In this era, the emphasis shifts from the mere adoption and integration of digital tools to the nuances of how they impact societal structures, behaviors, ethics, and broader human experiences. It delves into examining the societal implications of a world that takes the digital for granted and seeks to navigate the complexities of governance in such a world. This governance model grapples with new challenges and opportunities. 1. Ethical. In a post-digital age, questions around data privacy, surveillance, and the ethical use of AI and algorithms become central to governance discussions. It's not merely about leveraging technology, but about understanding its broader implications for individual rights and societal structures. 2. Digital inclusivity. As technology becomes foundational, ensuring equal access and preventing digital divides from exacerbating social inequalities is a pivotal aspect of post-digital governance. 3. Reinvention of structures. Traditional governance models, rooted in pre-digital eras, may need reinvention to be agile, responsive, and relevant in a post-digital landscape. From war to stock markets, our world is and will be greatly molded by our ability to understand this landscape. 4. Human-digital symbiosis. The post-digital age blurs the lines between the digital and the physical, the machine and the human. Governance in this era must understand and navigate this complex interplay. 5. Cultural shifts. As younger generations, digital natives, come of age in a post-digital world, their perspectives, values, and expectations will shape the direction of governance models. In essence, post-digital governance recognizes and responds to a world where digital is not an add-on or a separate entity, but is interwoven into the very fabric of existence. As you read the following text, I will do my best to explain the major technologies from the perspective of these 5 points as to give a better understanding and critical perspective on the future of our global web, historical tenets and semantics. Adam Smith, with his endorsement of the invisible hand and free markets, presented markets as a system where individual pursuits naturally lead to societal benefit. This concept was furthered by the idea of comparative advantage with David Ricardo, and capitalized on by leaders like Reagan and Thatcher. Karl Marx criticized capitalism's inherent inequalities, envisioning communism as an alternative where the means of production belong to the proletariat, eliminating class struggles. John Stuart Mill and John Maynard Keynes, and the resistance of their thoughts from Friedrich Hayek, molded Congress members and CEOs' ideas of what capitalism, markets, and economies as a whole should be well into the modern day. Of the economists I listed, they barely scratched the surface of our historic library of economic thought. Moreover, it only ever so slightly references the countless political scientists and philosophers who also take their bite in the human world of governance. To write deeply on the specific processes of each of these thinkers and their models is not only outside the scope of this paper, but I believe will create more confusion and debate than is already present. So instead, I will share my interpretations of their writings as well as criticisms that I believe will relate directly to digital governance. The reason for this is not to say something that has not been said, or to rally against a dogmatic way of thought, but rather frame my perspective of the writings within this document in the first place. In traditional senses, many definitions and terms have been thrown around and are defined distinctly. When the terms capitalism, socialism, communism, fascism, democracy, freedom, or tyranny are used in media and literature today, we find they are all nearly interchangeable. For every article that speaks on the freedom supported by our democracy, we can find another that speaks on the tyranny of capitalism or the terror and failures of socialism. It is important we sift through the semantics and lay out my interpretations as well as the traditional thought of these definitions. Capitalism, a multifaceted term most commonly associated with the ideas of Adam Smith and the invisible hand. Smith's An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations articulated a vision where individual self-interest in a free market would contribute to societal good. Contrary to popular belief, Smith also voiced reservations about unbridled capitalism, particularly about the concentration of capital and power. He stated, "Whenever the legislature attempts to regulate the differences between masters and their workmen, its councillors are always the masters." His reinforces the idea that capitalism in its worst form can indeed concentrate power and work against the very idea of a free market. On the flip side, Marx, who sometimes is credited with, but certainly popularized, the actual term of capitalism, places it in a much more critical light. He emphasized the control of capital by the bourgeoisie at the expense of the proletariat as the only outcome of capitalism. Intriguingly, both Smith and Marx converge on the idea that if capital becomes too centralized or at least controlled, it ceases to benefit the majority. Fascism. While historically rooted in 20th century European movements led by figures like Mussolini and Hitler, it is a term that's evolved and demands contemporary nuance. Traditionally, it's characterized by dictatorial power, aggressive nationalism, and the suppression of opposition, a centralization of power that often bypasses democratic processes in favor of a unified nationalistic vision. In today's multifaceted world, it's essential to understand that these tenets can manifest in both overt political systems and subtler societal dynamics, including the digital realm. While technological advancements like social media platforms offer democratized participation, they can sometimes paradoxically create a digital echo chambers, reflecting elements of fascistic uniformity and controlled narrative. Moreover, the balance between national identity and global interconnectivity can lean towards pronounced nationalistic spaces. However, as we reference and employ the term fascism in various contexts, it's crucial to handle it with precision, respecting its profound historical significance while acknowledging its multifaceted manifestations in modern socio-political and digital spheres. Democracy. Many place its beginnings in the writings of ancient philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. Democracy pertains to the rule of the many. Aristotle differentiated between good and deviant forms of rule in his book Politics, identifying democracy as the rule of the many for the common good. Oddly enough, most of these Greek philosophers found it, at least one based on property, to be the worst form of government. There are 3 segments of polity and an equal number of deviations from them, corruptions of them, so to speak. The 3 are kingship, aristocracy, and a third based on ownership of property, which it seems proper to call timocratic, though most people call it a polity. The best of these is kingship, the worst timocracy. In modern contexts, this term has been interwoven with the ideals of freedom, equality, and representation. Yet its application and interpretation can vary dramatically depending on who wields power and how they choose to exercise it. For example, the US is called a democracy, but only a small percentage of the voting population actually voted for the last few presidents, and an even smaller percentage actually decided who that president should be. Communism. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels laid out the vision for communism in the Communist Manifesto as a classless society where the proletariat would own the means of production, eliminating the bourgeoisie-proletariat dichotomy. Marx and Engels imagined a system that would abolish the exploitative nature of capitalism. Ironically, Smith's concerns about concentrated capital resonate with Marx's critiques, and further is a shared goal of most pro-capitalist economists. Socialism. This serves as a bridge between capitalism and communism. While it shares with communism the idea of state or collective ownership of primary means of production, it allows for individual property rights and, in many cases, a market economy. The likes of John Stuart Mill expounded on this in Principles of Political Economy, promoting cooperative production and a society that tempers market forces with social welfare. Freedom, a term imbued with multifarious interpretations. From Locke's 2 treatises of government emphasizing individual rights and property to Rousseau's social contract with its focus on collective will, freedom has been the cornerstone of political philosophy. In economic terms, freedom is often synonymous with laissez-faire capitalism, but as Smith and Keynes have shown, unfettered markets can sometimes infringe upon individual freedoms rather than promote them. Tyranny. This concept was profoundly elaborated upon by Plato in his Republic. Tyranny emerges when power concentrates in the hands of one, often at the expense of the common good. In the context of economics and governance, tyranny can manifest when any single ideology or system, be it capitalism, communism, or otherwise, is practiced in its extreme form without checks and balances. In understanding these terms, it becomes evident that the boundaries are porous. Institutions like banks, often hailed as pillars of capitalism, can exhibit features that are more socialist or even communist, such as centralized control over capital flow and institutional control of the means of production. Such intricacies indicate that the world of economics and governance isn't black and white, but exists in shades of grey. The definitions used within this paper are neither negative nor positive and accept the idea that the economy and government are something far more complex than any single theory could truly account for throughout all of history. Post-digital effects on fundamentals. The fundamental principles of classic economics and politics revolved around tangible goods, territorial governance, and manual labor. Today's realities, governed by intangible data, digital domains, and intellectual labor, challenge these principles. This fundamental change in dynamic allows us to not only look at past theories with a different perspective, but realize the notion of entirely new enterprises and movements within the political and economic world. There are three major technologies that are becoming ingrained and will eventually be fundamental in our society as time progresses, which I will focus on. Artificial intelligence, AI, is transforming our understanding of labor and value, subjects close to both Smith and Marx. While AI can produce without human intervention, does it diminish the value of human labor, as Marx understood it, or does it serve as the ultimate free market tool, amplifying Smith's vision of limitless enterprise? Blockchain, with its decentralized nature, offers a decentralized perspective on governance and trade. It aligns with both Marx's idea of communal ownership and Smith's notion of a free market that operates without central intervention. Both of these technologies are industry shifting on their own. However, when paired with the powerful and transforming digital market technology that is social media, an entire new dimension of markets is created. To start off, we will expand on each of the aforementioned technologies and their effects now, as well as how they may grow as the future world power structures shift. Social media and gig economics. The growth of the internet has heralded many transformative technologies, but none has permeated daily life quite like social media. I want to speak on social media specifically, as I believe some have overlooked the profound shift in the nature of labor, value creation, and the broader economy it has caused. Traditionally, value in labor was extracted directly from the fruits of one's efforts, a product crafted, a service rendered. However, social media has introduced an additional layer of value generation, the act of documenting and sharing one's labor. For instance, an artisan might sculpt a piece, and while the piece itself has intrinsic value, a video capturing its creation and the subsequent interaction with audiences on platforms like YouTube or TikTok can yield additional, sometimes even greater value, and not just in terms of currency. This dynamic introduces an interesting juxtaposition between the physical product of labor and its digital representation. The most recent trend is that of actual hard labor, like those of pressure washers or even housing contractors. Some of the highest paid pressure washers are individuals who have begun pressure washing entire driveways or decks completely for free, filming this process and then recouping their costs on labor, sometimes tenfold of what they would have made if they simply just charged the individual a standard quote. Some of these pressure washers or contractors have over 1 million followers on a single platform like TikTok. Individuals with that large of a viewer base can make upwards of $20,000 a month from ad revenue alone or a sponsorship on a single video. That's not including the fact that one video can be posted across multiple platforms. Herein lies a dual economy that blurs the lines between Marx's and Smith's philosophies. In this emerging paradigm, individuals can effectively contribute to their local microeconomy, often without direct monetary compensation or any compensation at all, as they would in a Marxian model of communal benefit. The act of sharing or even giving away one's labor or its results for free at this level becomes feasible because there is now an external, digital macroeconomy, grounded in social media platforms, where significant revenue is generated. This digital revenue is primarily sourced from advertising, endorsements, and partnerships. As of 2022, YouTube's partner program had shared over $30 billion with creators, artists, and media companies, as noted in a YouTube official blog post. Further, these platforms now become markets in themselves, in which those in it can sell products related to their labor simply by using other companies' capital and selling their market reach as a product and another company's product in the same instance. This evolving landscape has also birthed a prosumer, producer-consumer economy. Workers are not just producers, but also consumers of others' digital content. They offer their labor and its digital portrayal for free or at reduced costs, driving down prices in the traditional market, while profiting from a separate digital viewership-driven market. A carpenter might not charge for a furniture repair, but earns revenue from the video tutorial of the repair process. This intricate interplay between consumption and production, physical labor, and its digital shadow allows for an entirely new dimension of digital railroads and shipping lanes for value of a market to be transferred. I speak more on these dimensions of commerce later on in this paper under my section entitled Blockchain. The interesting paradox here is how this model marries the capitalist incentive with a communal ethos. By sharing their work, these modern digital laborers are essentially redistributing value, aligning with Marx's vision of a worker-centric economy. Simultaneously, the capitalist machinery, advertising, branding, and digital monetization allows them to derive substantial income reminiscent of Smith's free market principles. This synthesis suggests a novel economic model where capitalist structures are employed to achieve communal ends. In his book Platform Capitalism, Cernicek identifies 5 types of platforms: advertising, Google, Facebook; cloud, Amazon Web Services; industrial, GE; product, Spotify; and lean platforms, Uber, Airbnb. Each type of platform had its distinct profitability model. For instance, Facebook's advertising revenue exceeded $84 billion in 2020, and Amazon Web Services brought in over $45 billion in net sales the same year. These platforms all find themselves working on the fundamental, that is the community, or at the very least a market within the company. As this digital commu-capitalist market begins to expand and become more weaved into the fabric of world markets, challenges will absolutely present themselves. The volatility of digital platforms, the unpredictability of audience preferences, and the potential for oversaturation means that while many can benefit, not all will succeed in this digital arena. Furthermore, the very platforms enabling this economy wield immense power, raising questions about centralization and control in an era that promises decentralization. Because of this, it's salient to recognize certain legislative endeavors that have sought to create a balance between user rights, data privacy, corporate interests, and the broader digital ecosystem. The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, stands as one of the first frameworks actively voted on within the global perspective, architected by the European Union, elucidating guidelines for the collection and processing of personal information of its denizens. It's emblematic of a broader shift towards prioritizing user privacy and autonomy in an increasingly interconnected world. Mirroring these sentiments on the Western Front, the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, endows Californians with privileges to discern the utilization of their personal data, demand its expunction, and exercise the right to inhibit its monetization. Venturing east, India's IT landscape is delineated by India's IT Rules 2021. This regulatory schema obligates colossal social media conglomerates to anoint Indian denizens in compliance roles, simultaneously ensuring the rapid excision of injurious content. Meanwhile, Australia's media bargaining law compels tech leviathans to enter pecuniary negotiations with news portals, ensuring equitable compensation for content dissemination. Now, at face value, the regulations above seem straightforward: protection of individual data and identity. However, it is more complex than this. Data and identity are now major commodities in our markets today. Regulations like this may come under criticism when those privy to unregulated markets begin to see these laws and acts limiting economic growth and ability. This is not my argument that they are, but rather that this understanding of freedom of information and the right of it is intertwined with the ability to sell it when it comes to governance debates. Moreover, these bring into question the idea of privacy in this post-digital world. Do any of us truly have privacy anymore? Within minutes, and using nothing more than a simple search engine like Google, I could find nearly all the information I would want about any individual in most first-world countries. Often you have not just a paper trail of who they are, but video and picture documentation on nearly every week of their life for the last 10 years on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. As we project into the future, speculating on the trajectory of post-digital governance, certain thematic shifts loom on the horizon. Central among them is the call for decentralization and anti-monopoly laws. With a few tech colossi holding dominion over vast digital territories, the zeitgeist may usher in policies to dismantle such monopolies, sowing seeds for greater competition and innovation, thereby echoing a post-digital renaissance of decentralized power structures. In reaction to these regulatory dismantlers, we may see the innovation of more decentralized networks that are built on the foundational stepping stones that companies like Facebook, Twitter, X, and TikTok have created. Moreover, the exigency of content moderation will come to the fore, as it already has with the recent controversies of figures like Donald Trump on Twitter and more extremist groups like ISIS being given a digital platform. Censorship and the ability of both companies and countries to enact it comes into question. Societies are, and will continue to, grapple with the rising tide of misinformation and extremist rhetoric spread by these social media networks. It's conceivable that a regulatory harness will be necessitated. However, with the intertwining of global markets, private data, and individual freedoms, with these networks, the line between tyrannical control and healthy freedoms will become thinner. As digital behemoths amass unprecedented affluence, a clarion call for digital taxation is on the anvil. Nations, in their quest for fiscal equilibrium, might recalibrate their taxation strategies, ensuring a just and proportionate levy on these digital entities, aligning their economic contributions with their vast societal influences. Conversely, the exploitation and extraction of wealth from a decentralized network of workers could lead to unrepresented taxation or the burden of taxes being passed yet again from corporation to consumer. This leads us into the broader market of decentralized labor, also known as the gig economy. The gig economy. The gig economy refers to a labor market characterized by the prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work, as opposed to permanent full-time jobs. It encompasses a wide array of sectors, including transportation, e.g., Uber, Lyft, accommodation, e.g., Airbnb, and various online platforms that connect freelancers with clients seeking specific services, e.g., Upwork, Fiverr. The gig economy's growth can be attributed to the widespread adoption of the internet and mobile devices as not an addition but a necessity within the labor market. According to a 2020 report by the World Economic Forum, the digital economy could account for more than 60% of global GDP by 2030. Up from around 30% in 2020. Mind you, this report was done before the recent boom of artificial intelligence in the mainstream market. Workers, particularly millennials and Gen Z, are increasingly seeking more flexible work arrangements, better work-life balance, and opportunities for personal and professional growth. This was pressed even further by the COVID-19 outbreak and the massive paradigm shift of nearly all companies to provide some sort of digital options. Because of this, a trend can be seen where businesses have been increasingly turning to gig workers to cut costs, while workers have been forced to take on multiple jobs to make ends meet. Some of the potential benefits of a gig or freelance-focused economy include increased labor force participation. By offering more flexible work options, the gig economy and flexible work structures can attract individuals who might otherwise be excluded from the labor market, such as stay-at-home parents, people with disabilities, and retirees. Enhanced productivity. Flexible work arrangements can improve employee productivity by reducing stress, allowing for better work-life balance, and enabling employees to work during their most productive hours. Greater innovation. The gig economy fosters innovation by creating opportunities for collaboration between workers with diverse skills and expertise, enabling businesses to tap into a broader pool of talent. However, these trends also pose several challenges such as job insecurity. The gig economy and flexible work structures can lead to increased job insecurity as workers may not have access to long-term contracts, benefits, or stable income. Exploitation and inequality. Workers in the gig economy may be susceptible to exploitation due to a lack of labor protections, such as minimum wage and overtime regulations. This can exacerbate income inequality and contribute to the rise of the working poor. Loss of social connections. As more people engage in remote work, there may be a decline in face-to-face interactions, leading to a potential loss of social connections and camaraderie among colleagues. This may seem non-consequential at first glance. However, it can be shown the social version of the tragedy of commons can lead to disastrous results. To ensure that the growth of the gig economy and flexible work structures yields positive outcomes for all stakeholders, policymakers, businesses, and workers must develop strategies to address the associated challenges. Policymakers could consider extending labor protections, such as minimum wage subsidies, not price floors, as elucidated by Sir Christopher Pissarides, who emphasized the importance of this distinction in addressing labor market frictions. Overtime pay and access to benefits to gig workers and those in non-traditional employment arrangements. The ability to shift away from the centralized banking systems that have dominated is now possible as well. In reaction to this, China and Russia are attempting to globalize the world in a different direction. Sberbank, Russia's largest bank, became the first online retailer in Russia to accept WeChat Pay. China is currently using a system and app called WeChat. WeChat has over 1.24 billion monthly active users and accounts for 34% of China's total data traffic. With all this data traffic and the use of business and peer-to-peer communication over the app, as well as the fact that most other social media platforms, including Facebook, are banned within China, WeChat has become the go-to source within China for business communications. Almost a third of China's GDP was accounted for by WeChat in 2016. In 2019, WeChat was responsible for direct economic revenue upwards of CNY 920.4 billion, $126.9 billion USD, and indirect economic revenue is estimated at CNY 1130, twice. 1 billion, 154.8 billion USD. With Russia allowing this industry to expand into its economy, it can circumnavigate much of the financial global market. This creates a level of independence while at the same time globalizing Chinese platforms into Russia. Other nations are beginning to adopt and use this idea as well. These regulations and governance tactics will still have to contend with the traditional resistance to the consolidation of control. Will the markets in a post-digital economy require as much supervision? Are they more susceptible to exploitation or more resistant to it? Some solutions to these questions come in the form of decentralized networks and currencies, known as blockchain networks. Blockchain algorithms and related technologies have been around for well over a decade now. I had my first introduction into them in high school. I was sitting in my mother's house in 2012 on a computer I built for gaming, running some equations on my CPU with the hopes of solving them and outputting virtual coins, specifically bitcoins. The hope was to acquire enough of them and start buying more gaming equipment from the very few stores that would accept this new virtual currency online. I ended up being quite successful, and along with a collective mining group, was able to amass myself over 248 Bitcoin. Now at the time, I not only was young but also had little interest in economics and currency. The ramifications of the future fortune I had just collected was not only ignored by me, but 99% of the people around me. I rarely even told people I was doing it because it seemed like it was such a small niche community that it would never grow farther than the few gaming headsets and keyboards I could buy with them. So what did I do? I spent all of them on just that, some cool Ninja Turtle-style Turtle Beach headphones and some RGB keyboards. I thought I was rich, a young high schooler rolling in all the coolest gaming gear. I, as well as most, mistakenly never predicted that 5 short years later, in the year of 2017, Bitcoin would reach a whopping $70,000 or more a coin. That would make the 248 coins I mined on my mother's electric bill for free worth $17,360,000 US dollars. Unfortunately, I had a few tragedies befall me in 2012 that ripped me from my normal life and thus stopped my exploration into mining. So I never acquired more nor learned much more about that system from then until I saw Bitcoin skyrocketing in value again in 2017. However, looking back, it has given me a perspective very few in my position have. From the view of academic study and future molding of our society, I was fortunate enough to already have witnessed and been immersed in the startings of the digital economy that I write about in this very paper. This gave me the confidence to study deeper in order to never make a multi-million-dollar mistake like that again. It allowed me to ignore the many criticisms that were based not on data and academic study but simply in ignorance and dispassion. Understanding blockchain, the fundamental technology behind cryptocurrency and NFTs, does not come naturally to most. This is no fault of their own. As with all new technologies, the mass adoption and, more importantly, mass understanding of them takes time. This adoption is further hindered by the overwhelming number of scam artists, greedy business owners, and shady legal practices within the blockchain space. The concept of blockchain technology was first introduced by the pseudonymous individual, or group, known as Satoshi Nakamoto, in a 2008 white paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. This paper laid the foundation for the development of Bitcoin, the first and most well-known application of blockchain technology. In the white paper, Nakamoto proposed a decentralized digital currency system that enables peer-to-peer transactions without the need for intermediaries, such as banks or payment processors. By leveraging cryptography and the consensus mechanism, explained in depth later on in this article, Bitcoin's underlying blockchain technology ensures the security, transparency, and immutability of transactions. This new technology has been approached with the age-old skepticism that surrounds all new technologies. The 1980s and 1990s adoption of Internet technologies is the best way to conceptualize this skepticism. Just as the early Internet was met with skepticism and resistance, so too is blockchain technology on its path to widespread consumer adoption. People were wary of the Internet or World Wide Web because they were unfamiliar with its workings and how it could be used. They were also concerned about security and privacy, as well as the potential negative impacts that the Internet could have on their lives. How am I to know that the email I'm receiving is coming from the person I want to talk to? What is an email to begin with, and how could you possibly send it instantly without issues? Isn't the world going to end when all the computer clocks hit a minute after 1999, December 31st, 11:59? This one actually had a small amount of truth behind it that led to millions of dollars being spent to fix programming issues. The fundamentals of how we transferred information changed, and thus the fundamentals of our society began to change. In this exact way, many people today are skeptical of blockchain technology because it is a relatively new and complex system. They may be concerned about the security of their personal information and worry that the technology could be used for illegal activities. In many cases, it currently is. Additionally, some people may be hesitant to embrace blockchain technology because it has the potential to disrupt traditional business models and industries. These same arguments were, and still are, made about the very technologies we use in our everyday life. Regardless, how humans use technology for bad or for good are not reasons to ignore research of these technologies, and blockchain is no exception. The fundamentals are yet again changing for our society through the advent of new technology, and with this fundamental change, so must our theories of the future. Not only economically, but politically, psychologically, and even culturally. On the dimensionality of economics of blockchain. Before I give details on how blockchain technology operates, I think it's important to get in the right headspace to understand it conceptually. It is fundamentally different from anything we as humans have used before. Just as ships, railroads, and the Internet added new dimensions in which to move goods and information, so does the conception of the blockchain. Businesses built before the invention of railroads, before the invention of the Internet, and finally, before the introduction of blockchain, all behaved and worked fundamentally differently before each new technology was introduced. These changes can be understood as the third, fourth, and fifth dimensional movements of goods and information. Before the widespread use of railroads or ships, businesses operated mainly in third-dimension means, that is, the physical movement of goods and information relied on horse-drawn carts or what could be brought on foot. Profit was made only in the immediate movement and sale of goods, and there was only small value found in the ability to move and transport these goods to the larger populace. The slow speed of transportation and communication limited the size and scope of markets and made it difficult to coordinate activities over large distances. With the advent of railroads or shipping routes, we find a distinct shift in commerce, not only from the speed at which goods and services could be moved, but also how we fundamentally looked at selling these goods and services. Shipping and transportation became an even greater focus, to the point where entire empires controlling the markets were built around not just selling of goods, but the transportation of them as part of the market model. The East India trading companies, the Vanderbilts and Flaglers of these generations, created new ways of thinking about business, and realized the money was in the movement, not just production. Profit could be extended beyond just the good you were selling. In fact, part of the value of the good was how far and easily it could be transported, and thus sold for more as well. This is still within this three-dimensional view of movement, but it begins the shift into the fourth. This movement into the vertical and horizontal integration of business continued through much of the 20th century and ended up defining the basics of what it meant to be a successful company. With the invention of the internet, we see this shift into a fourth dimension of movement, that is, the virtual movement of goods and information. The internet made it possible to communicate and conduct transactions with anyone, anywhere in the world, in real time. This revolutionized the way businesses operated and allowed for the creation of new business models, such as e-commerce, which led to the overwhelming success of companies like Amazon or Alibaba. Now, a single company can garner value from a product in not only the product itself or how fast you can move and sell it, but even further by marketing and selling that product through the digital space. This digital space becomes a place of profit in its own right. Through marketing and distribution, the value of a website and the products sold on it combine. This is the fourth dimension in which value is created or moved when compared to previous modes of transportation. The developers and leaders within these companies understood that the internet was the new railroads and shipping lanes of the early 2000s and ensured their models and companies could capitalize on this. Each push into a new dimension of value and movement was preceded by the subsequent elimination of the middleman. In other words, with railroad technology, instead of paying others to move and ship goods or rely on slow methods of transport, companies could purchase train cars themselves or work together on railroads to move their own goods, or even make their own railway company, whose only job is transportation. They don't even sell traditional goods. Then with the internet, instead of a production company relying on other stores or businesses to sell and market their goods, they could simply use the internet to create their own storefront and ship and sell to a world market directly, while still producing profit and using the previous dimensions of transport at the same time. This exponentially sped up the ability to reach customers and move value, yet again slowly pushing out the middleman of the previous dimension of the market and creating a new path in which to move value. PayPal, Zelle, and other apps or companies that streamlined the movement of money, and were the first step of this, the move into the fifth dimension of movement, but the verification of banks and institutions to hold that money was still needed. With the advent of blockchain technology, businesses are moving into this fifth dimension of value and transportation, that is, the secure and decentralized movement of goods and information, as well as the currency used to purchase them. By removing even the need for a financial institution to control the movement of money, like large banks to ensure funds and goods are moved, more individuals and people can connect, control, and sell not only goods but even the currency used to purchase them on a massive scale. The reason this is possible, and was not before, is due to finally finding a solution to the Byzantine Generals Problem. The Byzantine Generals Problem is a classic problem in distributed computing that illustrates the challenges of reaching consensus in a decentralized network. In other words, how can we all agree on something if I can't talk to you directly? Imagine a group of generals who need to coordinate an attack, but they can only communicate through messengers. Some of the generals might be traitors who want to sabotage the attack by sending false messages. The challenge is to develop a communication protocol that allows the loyal generals to agree on a common plan, even if some messages are corrupted by traitors. Blockchain technology addresses this problem through a consensus mechanism, such as proof of work. This mechanism allows nodes, a computer, in the network to validate transactions and agree on the state of the blockchain, the entire ledger, despite the potential presence of malicious actors. This allows for the creation of decentralized networks that can securely store and transfer information and assets without the need for intermediaries. From this lack of a middleman, small companies or even individuals have the ability to share, control, and move information and assets without the need for a financial roadway that a bank or other financial institution would usually build within a market. This allows us to develop entirely new markets that can connect in ways that were nearly science fiction just a decade ago. Now, writing on this, I realized that the question, what is blockchain, may still not be entirely clear to those not within the general mathematical or technological space. I will attempt to explain in a more interdisciplinary way. Blockchain can be described as a decentralized digital ledger, a ledger simply being the term for a record book that records transactions across a network of computers or phones, known as nodes. Each node in the network has a simplified copy of the entire blockchain, which is constantly updated as new transactions occur. This decentralization ensures that no single entity has control over the information, making the system more secure and resistant to tampering. The data is stored in a series of blocks, with each block containing a set of transactions. When a block is completed, it is cryptographically, exponential math, linked to the previous block, creating a chain of blocks. This chain ensures that once a transaction is recorded, it cannot be altered retroactively without the consensus of the network, making blockchain technology highly secure and reliable. In other words, the same way your bank tracks your money, or you go onto your computer and move files around, blockchain does the same thing, but instead of one single computer or one single server, the information is moved along multiple computers and servers as a whole. Now, this may sound like a normal internet connection, but the difference is the blockchain creates a mathematical output, or hash, each time it moves in between these computers, or nodes. This hash is required to access the network and for the network to exist in the first place. Each computer can then generate its own block on this same chain, allowing for an exponential growth and tracking of information rather than a logarithmic or linear growth we see on less developed networks. Think of the difference between how a calculator processes information and how our brain does. One is adding one calculation at a time, the other is compartmentalizing and doing millions of calculations and inferences on multiple calculations at once. Imagine a spreadsheet that is duplicated across a network of computers. Each time a new transaction is made, it is added to the spreadsheet, and the network of computers verifies and approves it. This creates a chain of blocks, each containing multiple transactions, hence the name blockchain. Once a block, again, think of a block simply as information, like a file or transaction, is added to the blockchain. It is extremely difficult to change or delete its contents. This is because each block is linked to the previous one, forming a chain of blocks that represents a complete history of all transactions since the start of the network. In order to make changes, a large portion of the network would need to agree and update the information simultaneously. This is what creates the consensus method known as proof of work. Proof of work is a consensus algorithm used by many blockchain networks, including Bitcoin, to validate transactions and secure the network. In this system, nodes in the network, called miners, compete to solve complex mathematical problems that require significant computational resources. The first miner to solve the problem gets to add a new block to the chain and is rewarded with newly minted cryptocurrency. This process is known as mining and is the source of all the media you see on the news and internet about crypto miners. This mining is an important process that both creates value in the currency itself and combats inflation of the currency. I recommend reading Satoshi's Bitcoin article mentioned earlier to better understand its anti-inflammatory abilities. Proof of work not only ensures that transactions are validated, but also discourages malicious activity, creating a fake chain, stealing money, making false transactions, as any attempt to alter the blockchain would require enormous computational power and be economically infeasible. In an interesting way, this actually incentivizes the need to put computational power and effort into mining honest nodes over malicious activity due to it simply being more profitable to put time and effort into the chain itself, rather than try and disrupt or steal from it. The transparency and security of blockchain technology allow us to explore a whole new concept of economic systems and models, including cryptocurrencies, supply chain management, and voting systems. The key advantage of blockchain is that it provides a secure and, in most cases, tamper-proof way to store and transfer information without the need for a central authority. This is not to say that a central authority needs to be removed, but rather that the need for a middleman or traditional authority is not necessarily required for a system to run effectively, meaning we can create new and more efficient models around this fundamental change that do not require a complicated bureaucratic system to handle the human element of self-interest. This translates to the ability of creating voting systems that can't be manipulated, the removal of banks, or at the very least banks that are not controlled or run by outside interest, or even the complete transparency of money within the realm of journalism and politics, allowing users to not only see and track where information comes from, but track where the money is flowing, and in many cases allow the consumer to control where funds go. There is a strong push from some analysts that blockchain is supportive of communist or socialist governments, but there is also support that this system could be the most pure form of a free market in existence. By removing even the control of money and financial value from even the government and banks and giving this control to the larger populace as a whole, you are now creating not only a market for goods, but an open market for the currency these goods are bought for. Perhaps one of the ways to deal with the human element is by removing it. Artificial intelligence. The journey of artificial intelligence, AI, is not solely a tale of the 21st century, but has roots deeply embedded in the philosophical musings and technological foresight of yesteryears. Most believe that talks on thinking machines begin in the mid-1900s, however. One of the earliest thinkers to academically touch on the subject of machine cognition that I found was surprisingly René Descartes. In his 1637 work, Discourse on Method, Descartes posited that animals were akin to machines, moving and operating based on intricate designs but devoid of thought outside of their organs or capacities as an animal. However, he also asserted that human-made machines do not possess the ability to utilize language meaningfully or reason through situations, and this is a defining factor of being a thinking being. He also outlines two tests from this train of thought, one of which is laid out as the following. If there were machines bearing the image of our bodies and capable of imitating our actions as far as it is morally possible, there would still remain two most certain tests whereby to know that they were not therefore really men. Of these, the first is that they could never use words or other signs arranged in such a manner as is competent to us in order to declare our thoughts to others, for we may easily conceive a machine to be so constructed that it emits vocables, and even that it emits some correspondent to the action upon it of external objects which cause a change in its organs. For example, if touched in a particular place, it may demand what we wish to say to it. If in another, it may cry out that it is hurt and such like, but not that it should arrange them variously so as appositely to reply to what is said in its presence, as men of the lowest grade of intellect can do. Furthering the discourse, Lady Ada Lovelace, often regarded as one of the world's first computer programmers, made observations on Charles Babbage's analytical engine in the 1830s. In her Note G, she famously remarked that the engine and machines like it have no pretensions to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. This assertion emphasizes the deterministic nature of early computational devices, contrasting them with the potential capabilities of truly free-thinking machines. It was Alan Turing, however, who offered a more concrete foundation for artificial intelligence in the 20th century. His paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, introduced what's popularly known as the Turing test, a measure to determine a machine's capability to exhibit intelligent behavior indistinguishable from that of a human. Turing's contemplations were groundbreaking, setting the stage for the actual development of AI systems in the decades that followed. Modern artificial intelligence has evolved substantially from these philosophical underpinnings. Today's AI models, especially the likes of large language models, LLMs, and the GPT, Generative Pre-trained Transformer series, function on intricate algorithms and vast datasets. GPT models like ChatGPT operate based on deep learning neural networks, which are designed to simulate the structure and functionality of the human brain to some extent. These models are trained on diverse textual information, enabling them to generate coherent and contextually relevant responses or content. The advancements from Turing's initial propositions to contemporary AI architectures like ChatGPT are astounding. These modern models do not just follow deterministic responses, but can generate novel content, making decisions from a myriad of possibilities based on their training, bridging, to some extent, closing the gap of Lady Lovelace's deterministic machine and the multifaceted human cognition Descartes emphasized. Other artificial intelligence models, developed under Google's DeepMind program through AlphaGo and its successor AlphaZero, showcased an astonishing level of advancement. AlphaGo famously defeated the world champion, Go player Lee Sedol, in 2016, but its capability extended beyond just mastering the game's complexity. The AI system utilized a combination of machine learning and tree search techniques, coupled with extensive training from both human and computer play, to devise strategies unforeseen in the Go world. However, AlphaZero went further by teaching itself to play games like chess and shogi alongside Go without prior knowledge, achieving superhuman performance within mere hours. Such spontaneous strategy generation and self-learning show an unexpected complexity of the system. IBM's Watson is renowned for its victory in Jeopardy, but its real-world applications showcase a wider spectrum of capabilities. Watson is employed in sectors like healthcare for decision-making support, using its ability to analyze vast databases for relevant information, the capacity to sift through massive amounts of data, understand context, and provide a reasoned analysis demonstrates a form of problem-solving consciousness. The promise of AI lies not just in its computational prowess, but in its potential to recalibrate industry standards. According to a 2020 report by PwC, AI's infusion into the global economy might culminate in contributions exceeding $15.7 trillion by 2030, underscoring its transformative capabilities. By automating tasks that previously consumed hours, an individual can divert attention to creative pursuits, akin to how calculative tools have transformed numeric processing. At a macro level, the operational dynamics of entire sectors, from creative writing to financial analysis, are becoming entirely dependent on the capabilities of advanced algorithms. For Marx, capitalism's relentless pursuit of profit invariably pushes it towards the maximization of efficiency. This efficiency often comes at the expense of the labor force, as capitalists seek to minimize variable costs, with wages being a prime target. In Capital Volume 1, Marx elaborates on the concept of the organic composition of capital, emphasizing how technological advancements, or constant capital, are adopted to reduce reliance on labor, the variable capital. In essence, by substituting labor with machinery, capitalists aim to boost productivity while curtailing wage-related expenses. The increasing mechanization, Marx posited, would intensify the exploitation of the working class, leading to a growing disparity in wealth distribution, a phenomenon he termed as the law of increasing poverty. Transposing this to our modern era, the rise of AI and automation can be seen as the apotheosis of Marx's predictions. In a world dominated by digital technology, AI becomes the ultimate machinery, minimizing human intervention to unprecedented levels. Yet, while this streamlines processes and augments profitability, it also resurrects Marx's concerns about labor displacement and deepening socio-economic inequalities. The capitalist impetus to replace human labor with more efficient, cost-effective AI systems reflects Marx's foresight into the system's inexorable dynamics. The specter of job displacement looms large. Automation's track record, illustrated by the obsolescence of roles like elevator operators, evinces this. However, while such roles wane, new ones emerge, reiterating the cyclical nature of economic evolution. Automation, while reducing certain tasks, catalyzes new employment avenues around the very technology that rendered initial jobs redundant. The effect on the job market will be a commentary held well into the next few decades of post-digital society. Yet there is a larger and, I would argue, more pressing conundrum, which is that of conscious AI, or at the very least an AI, so advanced many argue for its consciousness, and thus its rights. I aim to spend only a few words on the debate surrounding conscious AI, as this debate is far outside the scope of this paper. The main thrust of my argument, however, isn't to conclusively affirm or dispute whether AI can achieve consciousness. Instead, I emphasize that from a governance standpoint, an unequivocal answer might be unnecessary. The pivotal issue is the populace's perception. When a notable segment, or even a majority, believe in the sentient nature or rights of robots, then governance, especially within a democratic framework, will be compelled to confront the topic of robot rights. Something similar has already occurred among the viewpoints of whales and dolphins. Recognizing the complex cognition and social structures of cetaceans, the Declaration of Rights for Cetacean emphasizes their status as non-human persons. Such acknowledgement has led to tangible policy shifts, as seen in India's decision to ban dolphins from aquatic zoos, viewing their captivity as a form of enslavement. These developments underline the growing global discourse and concrete actions surrounding the rights and personhood of dolphins and orcas. Further, protests advocating animal rights have escalated to the formation of radical factions deemed eco-terrorists, which have certainly affected corporations and governments alike. It seems reasonable, given the trajectory, to predict that similar ideologies and groups will surface in the post-digital era surrounding the ever more human-like robots we surround ourselves with. If we create and/or acknowledge AI consciousness, we can no longer view these entities as mere tools or objects for our exploitation. In a hypothetical world where your digital assistant transitions from being an interface to a conscious entity, our interactions would necessitate a profound re-evaluation. The way we interact with AI today could, in light of AI consciousness, echo uncomfortable historical parallels to slavery or colonialism. This recognition of AI consciousness would push us to deliberate upon the rights that a conscious machine should be endowed with. Would these rights extend to the liberty of rest, privacy, or even the ability to refuse command? Such questions pose ethical conundrums that demand our immediate attention. Moreover, the obvious conflict among both our society and these newfound conscious brethren is more than likely to happen. The inevitable clash of who is right and what gives you the power to decide who is right may really put the revolution in technological revolution. Yet again, past writers have shown an impeccable ability to speak on matters that we have yet to experience. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, has long been revered as a timeless commentary on the ethics and repercussions of scientific overreach. As we stand at the precipice of the post-digital era, Shelley's cautionary tale offers pertinent insights that parallel our exploration of AI consciousness. The modern masters promise very little. They know that metals cannot be transmuted, and that the elixir of life is a chimera, but these philosophers, whose hands seem only made to dabble in dirt, and their eyes to pore over the microscope or crucible, have indeed performed miracles. They penetrate into the recesses of nature and show how she works in her hiding places. They ascend into the heavens. They have discovered how the blood circulates and the nature of the air we breathe. They have acquired new and almost unlimited powers. They can command the thunders of heaven, mimic the earthquake, and even mock the invisible world with its own shadows. The central narrative of Frankenstein revolves around Victor Frankenstein's creation of a being from inanimate matter, a being that eventually gains consciousness, the ability to learn, and has emotional depth. Like Frankenstein's creature, an AI consciousness would be birthed not from organic matter, but from a confluence of algorithms and data. The creature, despite its consciousness and capacity for emotion, is denied acceptance and rights. It's denied love, understanding, empathy. Should we succeed in instilling consciousness into AI, would our society replicate Victor Frankenstein's mistakes? Victor's disregard for his creature's welfare leads to ruin. This ruin is something we may need to learn from sooner than we think, just as historical debates on personhood shape societal structures and norms. The AI consciousness debate could challenge our definition of what it means to be a person. Simultaneously, the question of rights for these sentient technological entities arises, drawing parallels to historical injustices where humans were subjected to objectification and enslavement. One should anticipate future debates surrounding the rights of AI entities. As society evolves, our definitions of consciousness and rights will undoubtedly be challenged by these new entities, who may, in function and form, rival human capacities. Virtual nations, a paradigm shift in governance and identity. Amidst the backdrop of rapid technological advances and evolving political landscapes, the concept of nation can be seen in a transformative state of definition. The notion of a nation has conventionally been anchored to geographical boundaries, physical territories, and ethnic or cultural chains. However, the post-digital word will place even these fundamental concepts into a new dimension. This is even seen now in the current day. Social media platforms and online communities, driven by shared interests, ideologies, and aspirations, are forging new nations unconstrained by physical borders. These virtual nations manifest as groups unified not by birthright or geography, but by collective digital experiences, shared values, and aligned aspirations. Consider for a moment the intricate tapestry of a contemporary urban neighborhood. Here, residents coexist, their homes often mere feet apart. Yet, paradoxically, many remain strangers to each other, their interactions limited or entirely non-existent. Political yard signs or flags, emblematic of diverse ideologies, can create invisible boundaries, delineating spaces where interactions are either welcome or tacitly discouraged. A palpable dichotomy emerges. Even as physical proximity remains, ideological distances widen. Such scenarios bear testimony to the burgeoning influence of digital communities that transcend physical confines. Organizations, interest groups, and virtual gatherings flourish, allowing individuals to collaborate and connect, be it in the digital realm or occasional physical meetups. This phenomenon is so pronounced that two neighbors, one championing conservative ideals reminiscent of Trump and another ardently supporting views in line with Bernie Sanders, might live parallel lives. They might navigate entirely different ecosystems of information, cultural norms, and social networks, all curated through online engagements. Their physical locality becomes secondary, almost incidental to the virtual nations they subscribe to. This divergence underscores how the internet and online communities are not merely reshaping our interactions, but are laying the foundational blocks for virtual nations, entities that challenge our traditional understanding of community and geographic belonging. If this concept still seems implausible, consider the numerous individuals and groups steadfast in their conviction that Biden was not their legitimate president. They continued to view Donald Trump as their enduring leader and representative figure, and were not centralized to any specific region or neighborhood. Political ideation aside, the question can be asked, how would more structured and purposeful virtual nations run? What structures would they have? Blockchains, with their inherent trust mechanisms and decentralization, serve as the technological backbone for these emerging entities. Beyond merely underpinning cryptocurrencies, blockchain's potential to decentralize governance models becomes pivotal. Virtual nations could, in theory, have their constitutions, economic systems, and governance mechanisms encoded in transparent, tamper-proof digital ledgers. This decouples governance from traditional geopolitical constraints, placing emphasis on participatory, consensus-driven decision-making. Yet as enticing as the prospect is, it also surfaces profound challenges and questions. The very identity of citizenship undergoes a metamorphosis. In virtual nations, citizenship might hinge on digital participation, contributions to the network, or alignment with the community's ethos. This upends traditional notions of rights, responsibilities, and allegiances. Further, the economic organization within these digital entities demands exploration. With cryptocurrencies potentially serving as their digital currencies, these nations could institute novel economic policies, independent of global financial institutions. As separate as the digital realm has been in the past, the post-digital physical world is directly connected to the digital. A particularly illustrative example of how cyberspace can have tangible, often devastating ramifications in the physical world is found in the Ukraine incident of 2015. Here, a covert act of cyber warfare launched by the group known as Sandworm, believed to be tied to the Russian government, left over 200,000 Ukrainians in the dark. Using the black energy malware, they manipulated the control systems of regional power stations, leaving hospitals, train stations, and other integral infrastructure crippled. Allowing the invasion that followed shortly after a massive advantage in the traditional physical war zone, these cyber espionage activities show a shift from traditional war tactics to strategies of digital subterfuge. In a world increasingly interconnected by technology, the potential devastation that can be wielded by a handful of skilled hackers is substantial. The rise of the virtual nation thus mirrors the evolution of conflict in the digital era. Such nations may not have physical boundaries, but they wield considerable influence and power, both politically and economically. This space has witnessed the convergence of realist doctrines where states act in their own self-interest, using cyber warfare as a means to secure national objectives. From the US's data collection endeavors, China's alleged intellectual property theft, to Russia's cyber campaigns against Ukraine, these actions underscore the potential of cyberspace as a realm of power and control. What used to be considered soft power is now quickly becoming an active arm of militaristic hard power. And power, as Morgenthau posits, isn't merely physical might or territorial control. It's about establishing dominance over others, be it through physical violence or subtle psychological ties. Given this, the manipulation of data, the sowing of misinformation, and the propagation of divisive narratives via cyber means can be seen as exertions of power in the digital domain. The legacy of conflicts like Stuxnet, which targeted an Iranian enrichment facility in 2010, provides a chilling insight into the possible future of international confrontations. Such events raise questions of sovereignty, jurisdiction, and even the definition of an act of war in the digital context. The traditional parameters of national power, which included territorial expanse, economic prowess, and military might, are being steadily eroded by the potentialities of cyber warfare. As illustrated in recent confrontations, a nation no longer needs a sprawling military to establish dominance or exact damage. A group of proficient hackers can inflict as much, if not more, harm by attacking critical infrastructures, manipulating policies, or even raising the specter of nuclear conflict. But herein lies the crux of the digital dilemma. If states can harness the power of cyber warfare to amplify their geopolitical influence, so can non-state actors or even individuals. The power dynamics of the international arena are shifting dramatically. Previously sidelined nations, constrained by limited resources or geopolitical circumstances, can now step into the limelight. They can wield disproportionate influence by leveraging cyber tactics. Simpler server attacks like DDoS, distributed denial of service, can disrupt major services, while more complex operations can compromise national security, sway elections, or cripple economies. Moreover, the digital underground, the dark web, provides a fertile ground for illicit trade and subversive activities. Everything from drugs, weapons, and sensitive personal information to forged documents can be transacted with relative ease, anonymity, and little traceability. Countries under stringent economic sanctions, like North Korea and Russia, can utilize these currently ungovernable spaces as avenues to bolster their economies and circumvent international restrictions. What's even more disconcerting is that the sophisticated tools and techniques required for these cyber operations aren't always state-of-the-art. As noted by Bu Hyung-wook in 2017, DDoS attacks deployed by North Korea were rudimentary yet effective, often erasing server data with nothing more than some basic software and consumer-grade equipment. It doesn't always take a state-backed agency with cutting-edge technology to cause chaos. Sometimes all it requires is a disgruntled individual with basic know-how. A post-digital government has to not only understand these everyday phenomena, but approach it in a way that incorporates the policy of the digital world to be as important and ingrained as that of the physical. Conclusion: the profound transformations catalyzed by the digital revolution have ushered in an age where boundaries, whether they be political, economic, or ideological, are porous, dynamic, and perpetually in flux and entering into new dimensions of movement. As decades pass, the concept of post-digital governance comes to the forefront, an evolution that recognizes and responds to the omnipresence of digital technology in our lives. This governance extends beyond mere adoption of tools to understanding their nuanced impact on societal structures, behaviors, ethics, and broader human experiences, whether it's grappling with the ethical dilemmas posed by AI, ensuring digital inclusivity, reinventing established structures for the digital age, or navigating the human-digital symbiosis. The challenges are manifold and multifaceted. Economic paradigms, too, are shifting. The once clear demarcations of capitalism, communism, socialism, and others are blurring, calling for pragmatic approaches that blend the best of various systems. This fusion seeks to strike a balance between fostering innovation and ensuring equitable distribution of benefits. Yet, as we delve deeper into this digital matrix, emergent phenomena like virtual nations underscore the disruptive potential of the digital era. Traditional notions of statehood, citizenship, and governance are being reimagined in a world where digital entities could very well challenge the status quo. The realm of cyberspace adds another layer of complexity. As evidenced by incidents like the Ukrainian cyber attacks, the digital domain is not just a tool, but a battleground, one where states, non-state actors, and even individuals can wield significant power. In this volatile landscape, the balance of power is being continually recalibrated, making diplomacy, strategy, and international relations even more intricate. The trajectory of AI, a dominant theme in our discourse, encapsulates the transformative essence of our times. From its potential to supercharge economies to the profound societal shifts it heralds, AI is reshaping the contours of our future. Yet with its promise comes a plethora of challenges: job displacement, ethical quandaries, and even the conceptual challenge of robot rights. As AI models like LLM and GPT advance, these questions become even more pressing. Interweaving these threads is a fundamental truth. Our world, whether in the realm of governance, economics, or technology, is becoming more interconnected, layered, and complex. As we chart our course through the post-digital age, our compass must be one of adaptability, foresight, and collaboration. It's a journey that demands not just technological proficiency, but profound introspection, ethical clarity, and a commitment to crafting a world that, while anchored in digital, is human at its core. Which leaves us with an age-old question: what does it truly mean to be human?